Hello friends, I have very exciting news, which is that I am making Patreon exclusive vlogs now. If you've been around since the very early days of my channel and you fondly remember me dyeing my hair in the bathtub and messing around in the kitchen and rambling about strange topics, then I'm sure you will enjoy these videos. I will be tired and I will be weird when I film them. The audio and video will be crunchy sometimes, I promise. For just $2 a month over on my Patreon, you can get access to all future Chaos vlogs, as well as all of the ones that I've already posted. Plus, of course, there's my Discord server and weekly live streams over there. If you prefer to support the channel with a one-time purchase, I've got merch. I've got these beautiful tarot card inspired designs featuring me and my cats. You can get those on t-shirts, posters, and even wall tapestries. I've got shirts that say Ebony Darkness Dementia Ravenway saved my worthless life. You can go check all of that out, links in the description down below. And now video. In the early 2010s, the world was suffering an unprecedented crisis of teenage girls being sold to One Direction. The whole concept resurfaced in somewhere in the past 5 years as a meme, with tons of people reading, reacting to, and even reenacting these fanfictions on TikTok. I found an ASMR video. I found tons of merch all over Redbubble and Etsy. Just to clear up any confusion, Sold to One Direction is not a fanfiction. It is not one fanfiction. It is a very, very popular trope. There are many fanfictions that feature a self-insert Mary Sue type original character being sold to the boy band One Direction. And yes, because of the sheer popularity of it, many of them are parodies making fun of the trope at this point. However, I'm convinced that the earliest ones were made in earnest, and I'm going to tell you why. In this video, I'm going to break down everything you could ever want to hope to know about the Sold to One Direction fanfiction trope. But before we get into that, I've got to tell you a little bit about this video's sponsor, Helix Sleep. They have great Cyber Week deals on right now, so it's a perfect time to upgrade your mattress. Helix makes premium mattresses and bedding, customized to your unique needs, and shipped straight to your door. Everyone's different, which is why Helix Sleep Quiz matches you with your perfect mattress based on your body type and sleep preferences. If you sleep with a partner, you can take the sleep quiz together and find something that's the perfect compromise for the both of you. Based on my results, Helix matched me with their Twilight Luxe mattress. It is their firmest mattress. I prefer a firm mattress because my spine is infested with scoliosis demons. It is very easy for me to mess up my day by sleeping wrong, sleeping on a bad surface. I have had my Helix Twilight Luxe for over a year now, and I love it. I've been sleeping great on it for a whole year now. My girlfriend and our two beautiful baby rat cats who sleep in the bed with us every night, and they sometimes sleep in the bed all day too. My Helix mattress is very highly endorsed by Binguses. And you can personalize your mattress even more by adding the Glaciotex cooling cover, which helps keep you cool and comfortable while you sleep. If it makes you nervous to buy a mattress that you've never personally tried, don't worry, because with Helix, you get a 100-night sleep trial. You can sleep on this baby for 100 nights before you decide if you really love it. There's also a 10-year warranty, and there are financing options and flexible payment plans. The best part about all of this is that Helix delivers your mattress straight to your door, and shipping is free within the US. It comes rolled up in a box and then expands once you free it from its cardboard prison. Super easy to set up yourself. Just make sure you read the instructions first. Do as I say, not as I do, kids. I really like my Helix mattress, so if you're in the market for a new bed, go check them out. Right now is the perfect time because they have great Cyber Week sales on. You'll get 25% off your mattress, plus 2 free pillows, like these ones right here. Click the link below, helix.com/strangeeons, or scan the QR code on screen to find out more about this limited time offer. And now I return you to your regularly scheduled Strange. Let's start with the absolute basics. What is One Direction? Boy band. Formed in 2010 and broke up in 2016. Why did I say it like that? I can hear you laughing. No, it's not that. I said something like 2016. Formed in 2010, broke up in 2016. They did that What Makes You Beautiful song, instant overnight hit. Going off of the cold, hard numbers alone, One Direction is one of the most successful boy bands of all time. The members are Harry Styles, Niall Horan, Liam Payne, Louis Tomlinson, and Zayn Malik. I believe they were all teenagers when the band was formed, and One Direction likewise had a very young, overwhelmingly female audience. I can tell you that I was a young female at the time of One Direction's peak popularity, and they were inescapable. I did not like them. Obviously, I was listening to Linkin Park in my Hot Topic skull hoodie at the time. That is why I am starting here with the absolute basics, because before researching this video, I would have been hard-pressed to tell you exactly how many members there are in One Direction, never mind what their names are. So because One Direction's audience skewed so young, their public persona was extremely wholesome, sanitized, perfect, shiny, sexless Barbie doll boys. Not really the type of guys you might picture being out there purchasing child slaves with drug money, and yet forced to love. Harry Styles' love story. My dad sold me to One Direction to date Harry Styles for money. The weird thing is, he thinks he loves me, but I don't love him back. Or do I? Harmony Davenport, beautiful, smart, intelligent, yet poor as dirt. Her family has been struggling for so long and have made their final decision to sell Harmony. If my father loved me, he wouldn't have put me up for auction. He hates me, abuses me. But when I'm up on stage and I hear sold, I look up and 5 certain boys standing there. 16-year-old Acacia lives in a time when girls take a special test and are paired with their new owner. Mia is just a girl who lives with her father in Canada. One night she is kidnapped and for weeks she is kept at a camp and trained on how to be an obedient slave. One day she is sold to One Direction. Disclaimer, I am not promoting human trafficking. This is a story set in an alternate universe. Everything in this story is purely fictional. Bought and sold to One Direction. Just a love story. Lauren Wozniak always expected her life to be normal, but when she is kidnapped and auctioned away by her ex-boyfriend, everything in her life changes, especially when they just happen to be vampires. This story is dedicated to my best friend Lauren. Sold. One Direction love story. Lacey Morin is sold to One Direction because her mom needs money. She never expected this to happen to herself. Let's just say that her mom is a big fat biatch. What will happen to Lacey? Can she manage living with 5 boys? Will she make it through alive? Read to find out! Alice was a farm girl growing up with issues, but she, like many other girls, were caught in the grit of a revolution from the deep. Will she make it out alive, or will certain prince away her intentions? What? When a bomb threat kills off the American population, all the remaining girls and orphans get shipped over to England to be auctioned off. No one caring about how it is like slave trade, just wanting someone to buy, someone to own. One Direction. Those 2 words that became famous and popular. Never did I see myself being bought by them, nor be near them. Being sold to someone like an object hurts. I was sold? For money? To a guy I don't even know? Who is he? Why'd he buy me? What does he want? What does he do? My name is Indigo Charisma. I'm 17. One day while I was out for a run to clear my mind, I was taken and then sold to none other than One Direction. My name is Lily. I'm a werewolf who was kidnapped and sold into vampires' slave trade. What happens when I am kidnapped by One Direction? Transformational fandom is a term coined by Dreamwidth user Obsession Inc. in 2009, and it has remained a very popular tool for discussing how fandom functions since then. In their original post, Obsession Inc. contrasts transformational fandom with what they call affirmational fandom, and what writers building on those ideas since have called curatorial fandom. Think about the types of people who have seen every single Doctor Who episode 17 times and can quote any piece of lore to you. People who collect rare merch, cosplay, have review podcasts, have Instagram accounts dedicated to collecting photos of their favorite characters or celebrities. These are acts of affirmational fandom or curatorial fandom. It's about appreciating this beautiful canon that they have been gifted by creators. Whereas transformational fandom, in Obsession Inc.'s words, is all about laying hands upon the source and twisting it to the fans' own purposes. You know, instead of just taking this whole perfect canon, swallowing it whole, you chew it up until it's a weird, gross goo. Maybe you put some hot sauce and mustard on it. You use the thing itself as a tool to make sense of your emotions towards it. A lot of fans were very intrigued by this idea of there being sort of a dark side to One Direction by turning them into these angst-filled bad boys, especially Harry Styles for some reason. Jasmine is sold by her family in order for them to have enough money to live. Jasmine doesn't realize how much trouble Harry is or what he causes. Mona and Bella are sisters. They don't live in the safest part of town. One night they get kidnapped and sold to One Direction, the most dangerous gang in town. As I walked into the dark room, I saw 5 shifty-looking teenage boys. They started whispering, and finally the blonde one spoke up. We'll take her. And before I knew it, I was being dragged off to a white van, sold to the gang, Punk AU. 17-year-old Shayla is sold to Harry Styles by her drugged-addicted parents. Shayla has no clue who Harry is other than a drug dealer. Harry is a ruthless evil monster. He is a devil. What is Shayla going to do during her new life with such a monster? Period, question mark. Demi Lovato isn't one of the popular kids. She gets bullied most days. When she goes home, it's no better. Her father wants to get rid of her. He eventually sells her to the town's bad boys. Sold to vampires? One Direction? Can we eat now? I'm starved, the one with the suspenders said. That'd be pointless just to do all that for one meal, I mumbled. The curly-haired one super speed up in front of my face and said, "You're a strange human, but not that different from the rest." Punk One Direction owns me story. Casey, a 17-year-old high school student, is living a hard life. Her dad is drunk, while her mother is sick and dying of cancer. Little does she know that her father has sold her to the devil in town, Harry Styles. Harry is a 22-year-old criminal. He hits women, he uses them, sells and takes drugs. An extremely popular trope in fandom was called Dark Harry or Asshole Harry. Like, extremely popular. A now massively famous example is After. It was a Harry Styles fanfiction so absurdly popular on Wattpad that I think it crashed the site. The author got a book deal, there's a film trilogy now. You've definitely seen people making fun of After on YouTube before. Obviously the character in it has no similarities to him, really, but it was a popular fandom characterization of Harry Styles as this, like, edgy bad boy crossing a line into abuser a lot of the time. And if you want to read more stories featuring a dark, tortured, and often abusive Harry Styles falling in love with a plain and average, but also secretly extremely beautiful and intelligent protagonist, the place that you want to go is Wattpad. Wattpad is the place for things that are not considered very classy in the fanfiction world. Wattpad is the biggest home of RPF, which stands for Real Person Fanfiction, so all fanfiction about One Direction is RPF, because they are real, as far as we know. Writing your original characters into fanfiction is another thing that is pretty universally considered cringe, or the hallmark of young, self-indulgent, uninteresting writers only in it for some kind of a wish fulfillment fantasy. Those original characters tend to be what we would call Mary Sue's, unrealistically perfect or extraordinary versions of the authors themselves. You are writing a little story because you wish your life was more interesting. And you can put yourself in the story, and you can give yourself waist-length raven hair with blonde streaks and purple eyes and telepathy, so why not? And then you write this character / yourself as My Chemical Romance's sexy tour manager who all of the members are secretly in love with. That would be generally looked down upon on other fanfiction sites, but it's pretty normalized on Wattpad, as well as some other smaller sites, and we'll get into that, but Wattpad is generally the face of this type of writing. In the early 2010s, the big fanfiction sites were Archive of Our Own, fanfiction.net, and Wattpad in that order of classiness. Which is kind of ironic for fanfiction.net, because Archive of Our Own was founded in response to fanfiction.net purging a lot of unsavory content. So AR3 was founded to have less restrictions, and it does have less restrictions, but because of that, it was seen as, like, cooler and woker and was quickly overtaking fanfiction.net in popularity. Anyway, if fanfiction sites are the garbage bin of the internet, Wattpad is the garbage bin of fanfiction sites. If you search for Sold to One Direction on Archive of Our Own, you will find pretty much only parodies of the trope, people making fun of it. But if you want to see some of the most truly earnest cringe you have ever experienced, you have to go on Wattpad. And I say that lovingly. I am the proud owner of a 13-year-old Wattpad account with an anime profile picture, okay? I belong in the garbage bin, okay? However, the huge popularity of Sold to One Direction as a meme, I guess, means that at this point even Wattpad is really flooded with a lot of parody versions. Most of the Wattpad Sold to One Direction stories that I see people reacting to on TikTok or YouTube are obvious satire, in my opinion. You can never know for sure, but I think they're pretty transparently satire. You gotta dig for the good stuff, and not everybody digs for the good stuff, okay? Come closer, this is my normal YouTube channel where we talk about normal things. Despite being degraded as one of the lowest forms of fanfiction, RPF, real person fanfiction, as I said, it has a pretty long and interesting history alongside regular fanfiction. The earliest recorded examples of RPF that we have, I think, as far as I've researched, they come from Star Trek fandom, because of course they do. Every time you try and research anything associated with fandom, it always comes back to Star Trek. At the time, the term used was RPS, real person slash meaning the romantic pairing of two characters, usually two men. Slash accounted for a big portion of fanfiction at the time, so when stories featured real characters, the real Star Trek actors, it was called RPS. There were no dedicated communities for it at the time. However, the odd story would appear in the Star Trek fanzines that were published in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Generally, this involved the characters messing with time and space in some kind of a way that had them meeting the actors who played them on the show, accidentally beaming themselves to the set of the show. However, there were also stories about secret romances between the actors, or about fan fantasies of having romances with the actors. In 1987, a fanzine published a piece of RPF called Shadows in the Rain, which sparked a huge amount of debate across the Star Trek fandom. The story is summarized in the zine as such. Spock's life becomes intertwined with the actor who portrays him in another reality as they visit each other over the years. Time and space and thinness between dimensions all play parts in this tale of a universe in which Kirk and Spock are very real, and one in which they are merely fiction. Or are they? While some fans loved this story and found it extremely unique and thought-provoking, others condemned it completely, one person saying, "The most disturbing thing about Shadows in the Rain is that it encourages a basic tendency in fans to forget the separation between the character and the actor. I realize that this particular story emphasizes separation, yet at the same time it undercuts our ability to keep Leonard Nimoy separate from Spock by bringing him into a Kirk-Spock fantasy." Yes, Kirk and Spock were also together in this story, because they always are. If it is permissible to include Nimoy in a piece of Kirk-Spock fiction, then why not Shatner? Why not both of them together? What's to stop the next writer from coming up with a Shatner-Nimoy story, totally violating the separation between fantasy and reality in Kirk-Spock? We may be sliding down a slippery slope here. There is a definite ethical distinction between fantasizing about fictional characters and fantasizing about real people. The first is harmless, the second may be hurtful in many ways. It is important to understand where Shadows in the Rain could take us. In that direction lies a Kirk-Spock that is neither moral nor sane. Meanwhile, also around the 70s and 80s, female fans of the Beatles and Led Zeppelin were creating something that was even more similar to what we see on Wattpad these days. Writing slash about band members together, as well as with imaginary female fans such as themselves. But most fans, whether they were in band fandom, celebrity fandom, or whether they were in fiction fandom, thought very similarly to this Shadows in the Rain commenter. RPF remained very niche, something that was considered very off-putting to the average fan. There was widespread concern that writing or reading such things might cause fans to become disconnected from reality, overstep boundaries with real celebrities who are humans who deserve respect, or that RPF is just inherently weird. It's just weird. 2002 was the year of one of fanfiction.net's infamous purges of unsavory content, and one of the things that they attempted to scrub from the site was RPF. Other fandom members argued that nobody should feel this pressure to police their own thoughts and desires. As long as they don't cross any boundaries with actual celebrities, they should be able to write whatever they want in their own fandom niches without worrying about their work being randomly deleted from fanfiction sites with no notice. Is RPF weird and disrespectful? I don't know, some actors have said that they're perfectly fine with it, so do we ask every single famous person what their personal boundaries are? That doesn't seem very feasible. At the end of the day, like, if you go onto a fanfiction website, you are going to catch a glimpse, out of the corner of your eye, of the nastiest, raunchiest, most off-putting shit you have ever seen in your life. And you can make all of the Tumblr call-out posts that you want, but you are never going to stop other people from liking things that you don't. Honestly, I am not nearly as interested in whether RPF should exist as I am in the fact that it does exist. People are doing it. They have been doing it and they will keep doing it. And I want to understand, I want to poke at the weird thing. As usual, I want to poke at the weird goo. And I think that our relationships with actors and band members and famous people, it's not functionally all that different from our relationship to characters. Little guy on my screen goes beep boop around. Oh shit, I have the deep human urge to storytell now. I've personally never read any RPF, except for the Sold to One Direction stories I read for this video. It's never appealed to me personally at all, but I understand why some people like it and why some people write it very effortlessly as if they're talking about characters. We started with fanzines publishing stories about Spock accidentally traveling to the 1960s and meeting Leonard Nimoy, and about Beatles members secretly hooking up behind the scenes. And at some point, around 2010, we arrived at Sold to One Direction. Now I heard this little rumor. I read on Reddit that the author of the original Sold to One Direction fanfiction had come forward on TikTok after over a decade to share their story. This rang multiple alarm bells for me. Firstly, because I have a PhD in My Immortal, and my god, the authorship claims. Secondly, it doesn't entirely make sense to make a big deal out of the first Sold to One Direction fanfiction. It's not the same as claiming to have written My Immortal, because with My Immortal, the question that we all have on our minds is why? Why would somebody write that? It's so deranged. Whereas with the Sold to One Direction trope, it's not that's not nearly as pressing of a question because even early on in my research, I was able to tell that the One Direction fandom did not originate this trope. The trope of being sold to one's favorite band or celebrity is demonstrably older than One Direction. Wattpad's search feature is absolute garbage, but a search simply for works with sold in the title brings up over 230,000 results. I cannot sort them by date, so this does not help me establish a timeline, but it does help me establish the insane popularity of this trope. Fanfiction.net, however, has a great search feature. It just doesn't host a lot of RPF. Still, we've got the Supernatural Boys being sold in 2007, quite a few extraordinarily talented and beautiful OCs being sold to the Malfoy family or to the Death Eaters as early as 2006, quite a lot of Bella being sold to Edward around 2007, 2008, and we've got sexy OC being sold to Saruman in 2002. And I could go on and on and on forever. Being sold is a very popular fanfiction trope. Another subset of this is kidnapped. I have read some Tumblr posts kind of explaining the appeal of these tropes. When a writer takes agency away from their protagonist, in whatever way they do that, it is a way of exploring desires without necessarily admitting that they desire that. I've noticed that this trope is often used in relation to villainous, or at least morally gray characters, who desire for is generally taboo. People who write things like this do not think that real-life slavery, historical or modern, is okay. They just see this as a useful device if they themselves are shy or dealing with some kind of repression, to be like, oh no, of course I don't want a sexy evil werewolf boyfriend, but what if he broke into my house and then, as someone who has never read these fanfiction tropes, I don't, personally get the appeal of them, but that is an explanation of the appeal of them that I have heard that at least makes logical sense to me. I feel confident in saying that the first ever sold to my favorite bad boy character / celebrity fanfiction may very well predate the internet. No, I do not have the handwritten sold to Justin Timberlake fanfiction from the 90s, but I think there is enough history on both the RPF side of things and the sold fanfiction trope side of things to say that that thing could very well exist in someone's notebook in a box in their parents' basement. However, I am nothing if not thorough. Shut up about that time I called the question a Spider-Man character. So I followed up on that authorship claim rumor that I heard on Reddit, and that led me to K.R. Forsyth, a longtime fandom member and fanfiction writer, now original fiction writer working on a fantasy novel around the same age as me. K.R. Forsyth will be the first person to tell you that they did not invent this trope. When I mentioned some of those really old early 2000s ones that I was able to find on fanfiction.net, they told me that they remember reading some of the Sold to Draco Malfoy ones. They told me they read a lot of banned RPF in the 2000s and early 2010s. They remember the Sold to trope being extremely popular in the My Chemical Romance fandom. That's right, emos, we're not getting out of this one unscathed. As well as for Adam Lambert, Big Time Rush, 5 Seconds of Summer, and some Sold to the band AUs about Dan and Phil, which, of course there is. K.R. Forsyth decided to write their Sold to One Direction fanfiction because they had already been reading this trope for years across many fandoms. In fact, they originally started writing it as a parody. I'm complaining about Wattpad being flooded with parody Sold to One Direction fics, and the possible original started out as a parody. They were a self-professed One Direction hater at the time, with a secret genuine love for the band. I was already a semi-popular fanfic writer, so it got very popular very quickly, but as I've mentioned before, it was written quite hatefully as a crack fic, making fun of the Sold to the band trope. When it became clear that I had offended a lot of people, and a combination of being in the closet as it was for my obsession with the One Direction boys, I switched it up very quickly and claimed that it wasn't a parody, but an honest fanfic. One of the lines from their fanfiction was, I pulled on an oversized black hoodie and stepped into my red Converse shoes, which I had scribbled my favorite One Direction lyrics on. And they sent me pictures of the actual red Converse with the One Direction lyrics on them that they had when they were a kid, which I think is just amazing. I remember that the MCR and other Sold to fics were very similar in their tropes, almost cookie cutter at times, which inspired me to write the parody. At that point it was already cliched. They almost always had a female main character, always 16 for some reason, who was awkward and plain and came from an abusive household, usually a drunk mother who was in financial trouble. They always started in the main character's room, with their mother calling them downstairs and finding the band in the kitchen and the mother dropping the, well, I've sold you LMAO bomb. The main character is always reluctant to be sold, I mean obviously, briefly, but warms up to it when she develops a close relationship with the boys and they invite her to move up from servant/cleaner to become part of the band. There were also many smutty or lemon variations of the fics where they're sold into sexual slavery. I feel these were more common with the more adult bands/artists like MCR and Adam Lambert, but it wasn't impossible to find darker fics for the teen bands. I didn't often read lemon variations of these and preferred the more escapist vibes, which I conveyed in my fanfic. I feel like there's a lot of stigma when people hear about the sold to trope and immediately go to the darker aspects of the trope, but I feel they weren't as common as people like to recall, or at least I was just quite young and didn't enter those spaces as often. Despite RPF and the sold to trope now being very heavily associated with Wattpad, K.R. Forsyth was actually never a Wattpad user, but instead consumed their RPF on Quotev, which is also where they posted their Sold to One Direction fanfiction. It was called simply Sold. They started writing it near the end of 2010 and updated it through 2011, making them 13, turning 14 at the time of writing. I was aware of the Sold to One Direction jokes soon after, but never connected the dots that it could have been correlated to my fanfic. At that point, Wattpad exploded with similar One Direction fanfics, and I just assumed it was referencing those, and I wasn't very big into the Wattpad scene. The cliches were so common that I didn't for a second believe that I had any input into the meme. It did not occur to them until many years later, when discussing iconic fanfic cliches in a Discord server with friends, and someone sent them their own fanfiction, that they realized it might have been bigger than they thought. They began to dig into some of the other Sold to One Direction fanfictions that were floating around out there, and realized that some of the references were very specific and seemed to have come from their work. Having now read K.R. Forsyth's Sold myself, they were nice enough to send me the full text of the fanfiction. Having now read it, I see what they mean. One of the lines when the protagonist is getting ready in their room in the morning, like before they get called down by their mother and find out they got sold to One Direction, you know? One of those lines is, "I put my hair in a messy bun." That's a line you see repeated in a few of the popular Sold to One Direction fanfiction parodies, and it comes from Sold. Although it is kind of a cool claim to fame now to have written this iconic meme fanfiction, K.R. Forsyth unfortunately went through really extreme bullying at school, as well as daily online harassment from both people from school and strangers. This led to years of mental health struggles and paranoia around people finding out about it again. They told me that the whole messy, terrible, horrible situation actually tarnished their love of writing for a short time, but they never quit and have now written a fantasy novel. Sold may have tarnished my love for fanfic and writing, but in the end I couldn't put it down and I intend to pursue a career in it. I was worried as a teen that it might hurt my chances and be something to pull up dirt on me as having written RPF, but I'd like to take this opportunity to come forward on my own terms and use it to my advantage. We will never truly know if Sold was the first Sold to One Direction fanfiction. You know, a lot from that era is either unsearchable or deleted now, but it's very likely that it was at least one of the earliest, possibly the first very popular one. I think it's a valuable puzzle piece in understanding how we ended up with the Sold to One Direction meme that we have today. Oh geez, oh boy. What a rabbit hole this one has been. I had no idea where this one was going to lead me when I started researching it. You ever seen a funny little TikTok about being sold to One Direction? You ever want an over 20-minute explanation to go with it? Welcome to Strange. Thank you so much for watching this video, my friends, and I will see you in another one very soon.